I know some of you have been starting to ask on Twitter, and yes, indeed, I will be doing a few 2017 NBA mock drafts. Between now and next month's draft, you'll probably get one a week, so not going to get a ton of them. Also, you're not going to get scouting reports. I just don't have the time or energy or desire to invest in it. I'll be continuing to watch prospects over the next month, so you might see videos coming up about, before the draft, talking about maybe the most overrated and underrated prospects in this draft. Maybe there will be some opinion pieces about certain prospects and what I think about them and their NBA futures, but actual scouting reports, you're not going to get that. You'll make it some of those other videos, though. So this is my first 2017 NBA mock draft. It's just a one-round edition. You can check out the description box below for the picks. I will say is that I'm still catching up. I am still familiarizing myself with quite a number of these guys. So this mock draft in large part is based off of a couple of things. One, based off of early impressions of some of the players. Two, factoring in some guys that I could envision rising or falling in the process based off of varying factors. Three, philosophies of certain teams and who they might be looking at. So don't hammer me too much on this one. In a few weeks, and when I've gotten myself up to speed, then feel free to hammer me. I don't care if you do or not. But my early impression of this draft class is, and it's tough, because you're basically trying to project 19 and mostly 19 and some 20-year-olds, both one and done college players and international guys, and this is where the NBA draft can become such a crapshoot. Like, at least when you're evaluating the NFL draft, you're talking about kids that have played at least 3 years, if not 4 years, or even if they've played 2 years because of redshirt sophomores. You've gotten a couple of years of film on these kids. You've got a couple of years of exposure to them, and you have a better idea of what they could potentially be. But in so many cases, when you're talking about the NBA draft nowadays, almost every one of these guys has major flaws and major question marks, because the simple fact of the matter is they're not that advanced in their game. Because the time they would have 20, 30 years ago been spending in college honing their craft and developing their game, they're getting in just to get their one and done and say, thank you, NCAA, for the exposure. Fuck you, NCAA, for not paying us. I want to go to the NBA now. And that's what it is. So you look at this, and there's always, upside and a lot of potential. But the fact is you're going to have some guys that bust out very massively. And it'll be interesting to see who ultimately does out of this class. When I look at this class, though, I see a lot of talent that I really like. A lot of talent that I really like. All throughout the first round in particular. But again, all of these guys have major flaws and major areas of concern, and they're going to need to put in significant work. And sometimes it's hard to project those guys that have coasted by on natural talent throughout their lives, and then they decide they don't want to work to get better. What guys are going to really step up and take their games to whole different levels, you never know. You just don't know. That's what it is. It's a massive guessing game. And to me, the NBA draft is a much less exact science than the NFL draft. But looking at this draft, and you'll look at my mock, you'll see that the order is just based off of, for the lottery, based off of the percentage odds of getting the first overall pick. And then it's 15 through 30 is just based off of order of finish of teams and who's traded picks and so on and so forth. But my top three probably looks very similar to a lot of other top threes right now. That's Markelle Fultz going 1 to Boston, the combo guard from Washington, Josh Jackson, the wing from Kansas, going 2 to Phoenix, and Lonzo Ball, the point guard from UCLA, going 3 to the Lakers. That's interesting because I look at those three guys in particular, and I see three guys that have stud potential. They have big-time NBA abilities, big-time NBA potential. But it's also one of these deals where for each of these three guys, I have real significant, serious concerns about them and whether or not they are really worth taking that high, or more importantly, if they're going to be the type of guys that their potential indicates that they should be able to be or could be able to be. going to start off with Fultz. Like right now, I think he's, relatively universally thought of as the top prospect in this draft. And I find that very interesting because for all the things he could do offensively, I question what position he's best suited for at the NBA level. I know most everybody lists him as a point guard, but I don't think he's an NBA point guard. I don't know that he has the explosiveness to play point guard at the NBA level, both offensively and especially defensively. You're talking about a guy that's 6'4", yes, and you'd love to have a point guard with that type of size, but he's still big enough to play the two. But I think similar to D'Angelo Russell a couple years ago, is that might be his best NBA fit, is to be a more skilled two, a better ball handling two, a better facilitating two, a facilitating scoring guard type of guy. When I look at Fultz, I see quite a bit of D'Angelo Russell. And what really concerns me when you're talking about taking a guy like Fultz, like I said, he's not incredibly explosive. He's not a big-time above-the-rim player. And just because a guy can dunk sometimes doesn't necessarily make him an above-the-rim type of guy. And I look at him and I say, what's so different between him and, let's say, a Jamal Murray from last year's draft class? And what concerns me about Fultz, too, is you look at his 1 year at Washington. He put up big numbers, especially offensively, but his team stunk to high hell. And you could talk about the lack of talent around him, perhaps, but Jiminy Christmas, the fact of the matter is, his team won, 9 games this past season? Is he the type of leader that is going to make other people better? Is he the type of dude that can really be a franchise player and churn around a franchise? Or is he going to be the type of guy that goes to a bad team and puts up a bunch of garbage numbers and 3 years later, your team is still garbage? And especially when I watch him, what's frustrating for me on both ends of the floor is sometimes I worry about his desire and his fire to take over and truly dominate the game. He has the ability to take over and dominate games. But I worry about if he has the will for it, if he has the desire to do so. Sometimes it just kind of seems like he blends in a little bit. And he takes plays off. And again, when you talk about taking a kid number 1 overall, those aren't exactly traits that you want to be questioning. So again, for a guy that is as immensely skilled offensively as Fultz is, I have a lot of questions. And I'm already questioning what NBA position he is. So that really makes me shaky about whether or not he should be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft, especially this one, which I think has some good talent in it. I look at Josh Jackson. Here's a guy when you talk about can play both ways, has a fiery personality, clearly wants to be an alpha dog, clearly wants to play hard consistently, plays with no fear. Just a lot to like about him, but he's not a great shooter. His free throw shooting is particularly atrocious. And then you get to all the off-the-court stuff and some of the issues he's gotten into, talking about vandalizing Kansas women's basketball team member's car and threatening to beat her ass and getting traffic tickets and all this other crap. What's going to happen when this kid gets a ton of money playing in the NBA? If he can't behave himself in damn college, what's he going to do at the NBA level when he's got a bunch of enablers and yes people surrounding him and he's got a bunch of money in his pocket? It could be a recipe for disaster. And you look on the court, you see sometimes that lack of discipline, a guy that can commit some really bad fouls, that can bark at the refs a little too much, a guy that is prone to getting some unnecessary technical fouls. You worry about his discipline, you worry about his maturity, and at this point in time, both on and off the court sometimes, it's a lack of discipline and maturity that I think really holds a Josh Jackson back from being what he could be out of this draft class, which is the top overall player down the road. And then we get to Lonzo Ball, easily the most talked about and most hotly discussed prospect in this year's draft, and probably, frankly, in quite some time. And as we know, it doesn't have that much actually to do with the player. Now, when I watch Lonzo Ball, I see some of the Jayson Kidd comparisons. I mean, this kid can be a wonderful basketball player. Offensive skill, his court vision, his ability to facilitate, his instincts for the game offensively, and frankly, his instincts for the game defensively. Being able to shoot the passing lanes and being able to use his length well at times when he wants to. I mean, he has all-star potential as an all-around player. And you look at him and you're like, man, He has some special traits and characteristics, but massive concerns to me about Lonzo Ball too. Does he have the desire to dominate? Because damn it, sometimes he can be a really frustrating player to watch. Like I said, he's a wonderfully skilled player, and he can be a lot of fun to watch. But does he want to own the game? Or does he sometimes just want to play it? And to me, sometimes he was too worried about kind of letting the game come to him instead of going out there and making the game come to him, or going out there and affecting the game and making the game his. Because to me, especially his 1 year at UCLA, most every night he should have been the best player on the floor. And there were just times where he simply wasn't. And that just can't happen, especially when you're talking about him going into an NBA situation where he's going to be going to a bad team. Let's say in this case the Lakers. They're going to need him to be that guy that can impose his will in the game night in and night out. And I just didn't see that out of him enough at UCLA to assure myself that he's going to be able to do it at the NBA level. There's going to be concerns about his shooting mechanics. Now, granted, I thought he was an effective shooter. I thought he was able to get his shot off at the college level. But based off of the low release point, I'll have some concerns about his ability to get that shot off at the NBA level, especially off the dribble. That's one thing if you're spotted up outside and you're open, and you don't have a guy that can block your shot. But what happens when you have to create off of the dribble? What happens when you have to stop and hit a mid-range jump shot? That could be a little more concerning. He's going to lead to him having to fade back maybe a little bit more, and could lead to some inconsistencies in that jumper that didn't really affect him at UCLA. Not saying he can't shoot like that, but it does have some concerns for me. Then I look at the desire to defend, coming back again to that desire piece. You look at a kid like Lonzo Ball and see how wonderfully skilled he is and how wonderfully talented he is. And sometimes you wish those guys played with more fire and more desire, and they can really piss you off because you're like, you should be a whole different level than what you are. Like I think about that with LeBron James for many years. Everybody was ready to crown him the king, and I always thought, when he was coming out of St. Vincent, St. Mary's, I said, if anybody was ever going to be better than Michael Jordan, I thought it was going to be LeBron James. But it took him many years to really get that killer instinct. And even at times, I still think that killer instinct is lacking. But he's better than he was. He shows more desire to dominate on a more consistent basis than he used to, but he still doesn't do it all the time, in my opinion. But he's much more consistent about it and does it much more frequently. But it could be, again, very frustrating because, yes, it's great. You scored 20 points and had 10 rebounds and 10 assists, and all the people that don't fucking understand basketball think your triple-double was awesome, but your team needed you to score 40 and lock down this perimeter player, and you did neither. I look at Lonzo Ball, and I really worry about his desire to defend, desire to take over, but especially in the defensive end, he's got the ability to be a decent, if not high-level defender at the NBA level, with his quickness, with his length, with his instincts for the position, his nose for getting his hands in the passing lanes, shooting those passing lanes. I really think he could be a top-flight defender at the NBA level if he wants to. And at times you saw it at UCLA, but you had other times where you saw the Ball effect, where this kid couldn't give two shits about playing defense. And he's just got to be better in that area. But ultimately, we know when it comes down to Lonzo Ball, you talk about his dad. LeVar is going to be part of the equation. And I'll dedicate my own video to this whole thing and this whole situation. But right now, what I'll simply say is, you're talking about this kid who clearly is still heavily under the influence of his dad. If you're an NBA team, do you want that headache? Do you want somebody going out there and questioning you in the media all the time? Questioning you on social media all the time? Do you want somebody potentially sabotaging your coaching staff by telling his son that, hey, don't listen to them, listen to me, because I played at Washington State back in the day, and man, I was a magnificent scrub averaging 2.5 3 points per fucking game, but I could beat Michael Jordan one-on-one. LeVar Ball is part of the equation. If he wasn't, Lonzo Ball would probably be the hands-down number one pick in this draft. But you have to weigh that risk, and it is a risk, and it is a big risk because it could potentially be a locker room distraction. It could potentially be an organization divider. It could ultimately divide fan base. It could do a lot of disastrous things because of that one fucking knucklehead. Do you need that in your life? Do you want that in your life? Does the talent outweigh the risks of the dipshit dad factor? And I don't know if it does. I don't know if it doesn't, but I don't know if it does. So even with some of these other factors, what if LeVar Ball tells him, hey, you don't really need to play this game that hard? Lonzo's going to sit there and what? Listen to his dad because he always fucking has. That's really concerning. So I look at these top 3 kids and I'm like, man, these guys could be multiple-time All-Stars at the NBA level. They've got some really big holes in their game, some really serious concern areas for me. What is also going to be interesting, too, when we get to the lottery here in a few days, who ultimately gets the #1 overall pick. I'm sure the Philadelphia 76ers are desperately hoping that the Lakers don't end up in the top 3 because that means that they'll get their draft pick and the Sixers would have 2 high first-round picks. But what happens if Boston gets the #1 overall pick? Who do they take? Most mock drafts right now, including mine right now, are going to say Fultz, but I don't know if that's the best fit for them. I could make an argument that Josh Jackson might be the best fit for them. But what do they do? And if they do get that first overall pick, and let's say the Lakers are sitting there at 2 or sitting there at 3, knowing that the Lakers have a desire to get Lonzo Ball, they probably think Lonzo Ball is going to be a major difference maker for them, and he potentially could be. Do you roll the dice and take Lonzo Ball #1 if you're Boston and force the hand of the Lakers to coax a trade up out of them and potentially set yourself up well down the road with other first-round picks from the Lakers? That could be the really interesting story here, is we could get some type of movement involving Lonzo Ball in this draft. Not saying it's going to happen, but it could. So it'll be really interesting what happens with this NBA draft. And like I said, over the next few weeks, you'll get a few more mock drafts out of me. It's going to be about 1 week until we actually get to the draft and some other draft-related content. So I hope you enjoy.